Hey. Welcome to a world of laughter, learning, and entertainment. Greetings, explorers of knowledge. Join us as we embark on a quest to understand Operation Toan Thang IV. Operation Toan Thang IV Complete Victory was a U.S. Army and Army of the Republic of Vietnam ARVN operation conducted between 1 November 1969 and 1 May 1970 in the Vietnam War. The operation was designed to keep pressure on Vietcong VC and People's Army of Vietnam PAVN forces in III Corps. In the next portion, we'll be immersing ourselves in the realm of background and examining its broader implications. The operation was a continuation of Operation Toan Thang IV in the same operational area and with largely the same forces. The spotlight now falls on November as we delve deeper into its details. On 19 November, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division operating 21 northwest of Tân An found a munitions cache containing 72 RPG-2 grenades, 106 hand grenades and 5,000 rounds of small arms ammunition. On 21 November, a unit of the 1st Cavalry Division Emable operating near Phuoc Bon District found a weapons cache containing 39 rifles and 4 machine guns. On 29 November, helicopters from the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division and Tactical Airstrikes kill 69 PAVN. Get ready for an enlightening exploration as we dig into December and understand its role in the broader context. On 1 December at 6:50, Rangers from the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, engaged 20 PAVN for me south of Tân An, killing 5 and capturing 1. Southwest of District. The enemy withdrew after 5 minutes, leaving 7 dead. U.S. losses were 2 killed. At 9:30, mechanized infantry of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, investigating an artillery strike northwest of Phuoc Bon supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and Douglas AC-47 Spooky northeast of Go Doha engaged an enemy unit in a 25-minute firefight. The enemy withdrew, leaving 9 dead and 6. On 3 December in the early morning there were attacks by fire on Du Ting Base Camp, Tin An Combat Base and Coon Lee Base Camp causing minimal damage. At 2:45 a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy force 2 mi southwest of killing 5 and capturing 2 AKs. At 6:20 helicopter gunships from the 1st Squadron, 9th Cavalry Regiment Earth Cavalry attacked an enemy force east-southeast of Tân An. Brigade infantry moved to the area and killed 5 PAVN in a brief skirmish. And Hughes OH-6 KUs northwest of. On 4 December in the early morning, there were attacks by fire on Tin An Combat Base and Sing Base Camp causing minimal damage. At Sing, helicopter gunships of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, attacked the firing positions causing 2 secondary explosions. At 1 a unit of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, was air assaulted into the location of an airstrike 16 mi west of Tin An where they found 10 PAVN dead and 3 SKS rifles and base camp with a 4-ton rice cache and 73 .60 mortar rounds. On 5 December, in the early morning, an attack by fire hit Tin An Combat Base, causing minimal damage. At 12:30 helicopter gunships from the 1st Cavalry Division received fire west of Phuoc Bon. The enemy withdrew after 30 minutes, leaving 7 dead. U.S. losses were 2 killed. Also at 11 a unit of the 199th Infantry Brigade United States southeast of Binh Ha. The enemy withdrew after 30 minutes with unknown losses. U.S. losses were 2 killed. At 4:30 the Earth Cavalry supported by artillery and helicopter gunships engaged an enemy unit 18 mi northeast of Tin An. The enemy withdrew at 7, leaving 20 dead. Northeast of Tin An supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew after 20 minutes, leaving 45 dead and 12 individual weapons, 160 mortar and a JK south of the earlier contact. Another unit of the 1st Brigade engaged an enemy force. The action continued until 4 when the enemy withdrew, leaving 8 dead and 7 individual weapons. U.S. losses were 1 killed. At 1, a unit of the 199th LIB operating 13 mi northwest of Unlik district found the bodies of 10 PAVN killed earlier by airstrikes. North of Tinin, the helicopter engaged the enemy and called in artillery and airstrikes, and 10 PAVN dead were seen in the strike area. At 12:10, a unit from the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, was attacked southeast of Katam Camp supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew at 3:40, leaving 19 dead and owned Cole machine gun. At 3:45, helicopters from the Earth Cavalry attacked an enemy force west-northwest of Phuc Bon. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and airstrikes, and the enemy withdrew after 20 minutes, leaving 6 dead and 1 individual weapon. At 5:40, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy force southeast of Katam. The enemy withdrew after 2 hours, leaving 23 dead and 3 crew-served weapons. At 6:20, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry attacked an enemy force northwest of Phuc Bon. The enemy withdrew at 3, leaving 8 dead. US losses were 1 killed. At 9:40, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, patrolling northeast of Unlik containing 12 RPG-7 launchers, 40 RPG-2 grenades and 136 AT-2 mortar rounds, northwest of Tinin, and engaged them with small arms and artillery fire. A sweep of the area at dawn found 6 PAVN dead, 3 RPG launchers, 2 AKs and a radio. At 1:10, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy squad northwest of Phuc Bon. A unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, found 11 PAVN dead and 5 individual and 1 crew-served weapons. All had been killed by artillery fire in the previous 12 hours. At 5:25, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry attacked 6 PAVN southwest of Like. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships, and the enemy withdrew after an hour, leaving 6 dead. North of Hipha, the unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships, and the enemy withdrew. At 10:30, a unit of the 1st Cavalry Division engaged an enemy force northeast of Tinin. All had been killed by airstrikes. At 3:30, an armoured unit of the 25th Infantry Division found 16 PAVN dead southeast of Binha. The enemy withdrew after 20 minutes, leaving 3 dead. US losses were 1 killed. At 9:10, helicopter gunships of the 1st Cavalry Division received fire northeast of Phuc Bon and attacked the firing position supported by an AC-47 gunship, and 11 PAVN dead were seen in the strike area. At 2, helicopter gunships of the 1st Cavalry Division attacked an enemy force southeast of Tinin. The unit was supported by artillery and helicopter gunships, and the fighting continued until 6:05 when the enemy withdrew, leaving 20 dead and 1 captured and 5 individual weapons. US losses were 1 killed. At 3:05, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Infantry Division, United States, northwest of Hipha, and were immediately engaged by an enemy force. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships, and the enemy withdrew at 8:30, leaving 5 dead and 1 individual and 1 crew-served weapon. US losses were 1 killed. At 4, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry received fire 14 mi northeast of Phuc Bon and attacked the firing position supported by artillery fire, killing 11 PAVN. At 5:55, helicopter gunships of the Earth Cavalry killed 5 PAVN northeast of Phuc Bon and attacked the firing positions, killing 12 PAVN. At 11:30, a unit of the Armoured Cavalry Squadron of the 25th Infantry Division operating northeast of Binha, killing 5. At 6:15, helicopter gunships of the Earth Cavalry attacked an enemy force northeast of Phuc Bon, killing 6. Northeast of Trung being engaged 7 PAVN, killing 5 and capturing 1 individual weapon. At 10:45, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, patrolling southwest of Phuc Bon engaged 10 PAVN, killing 7 and capturing 1 individual weapon. At 11:35, an armoured unit of the 25th Infantry Division found a munitions cache east of Tinin. The unit was supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes, and reinforced by a South Vietnamese regional force east-southeast of. On 15 December at 8:20, a unit of the 11th ACR and the ARVN 9th Regiment, 5th Division engaged an enemy company 2 mi southeast of. Another 11 ACR unit reinforced, and artillery, helicopter gunship and air support was provided. The enemy withdrew at 9:30, leaving 51 dead and 15 individual and 7 crew-served weapons. U.S. losses were 4 killed. At 1, an armored unit of the 25th Infantry Division was attacked southeast of Phuoc Bon. The air rifle platoon was landed in the area and found 11 PAVN dead and captured 3. West of Lake, containing 170 RPG-2 grenades. An OH-6 was shot down southeast of Du Ting was attacked. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships, and the enemy withdrew at 2:50. At 8:50, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, engaged an enemy force northeast of Tinin. The enemy withdrew after 15 minutes, leaving 17 dead. At 5, helicopter gunships of the 1st Cavalry Division engaged an enemy force southeast of Phuoc Bon and returned fire, killing 8. On 18 December at 12:30, a rocket attack on Tinin combat base killed a Kit Carson scout. At 7:50, a unit of the 199th LIB was ambushed 9 mi west of Unlik. The enemy withdrew after 5 minutes, leaving 2 dead and 2 individual weapons. U.S. losses were 1 killed. At 12:30, helicopter gunships from the 1st Cavalry Division received fire southwest of. The enemy withdrew after 15 minutes, leaving 14 dead. U.S. losses were 1 killed. Southeast of Phuoc Bon, and returned fire and directed artillery and airstrikes onto the area. 9 PAVN dead were seen among 15 destroyed bunkers in the strike area. At 2:10 north-northwest of Kunli, killing 15 PAVN. At 11:40, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, operating north-northeast of Unlik. The unit was supported by artillery and an AC-119 gunship. The enemy withdrew at 9:30, leaving 7 dead and 4 individual weapons. At 9:55, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, engaged an enemy platoon northwest of Tinin. East-northeast of Binha, the enemy withdrew after 25 minutes, leaving 2 dead. At 5, helicopter gunships of the Earth Cavalry killed 7 PAVN east-southeast of Tinin. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships, and the enemy withdrew. An AH-1 was shot down southeast of Trong Binh. At 7:30, a reconnaissance unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, was attacked southwest of Lik Ninh, killing 30 PAVN and destroying 14 bunkers. At 8, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, and RF forces triggered a command-detonated mine south-southwest of Anlik, Bonphic east of Trong Binh, and fired on them, killing 3 and capturing 1 individual weapon. On 25 December at 9:05, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Infantry Division, in a night defensive position 11 mi northeast of Bin, fired on a PAVN soldier approaching their position, killing him and capturing his weapon. At midday, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, observed 5 PAVN setting up a command-detonated mine southeast of Katam and returned fire, killing 2 PAVN. At 1, a reconnaissance helicopter of the 1st Cavalry Division received fire south of. The unit returned fire supported by helicopter gunships, and the enemy withdrew after 15 minutes, leaving 4 dead. At 11:30, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, engaged 11 PAVN northwest of Lik Ninh. At 12:45, ground units of the regiment and RF forces swept the area and engaged the PAVN supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The PAVN withdrew at 1:10, leaving 79 dead among 40 destroyed bunkers. U.S. losses were 1 killed. The PAVN were identified as coming from the 7th Division Vietnam southeast of Tan, and all had been killed by airstrikes earlier that day. At 1:30, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, was led to a munitions cache forming east of Trong Binh by Chiu Hoi. The cache contained 3,107 rockets and 4,000 rounds of ammunition. At helicopters from the 12th Combat Aviation Group engaged an enemy force west-southwest of Laik was attacked by fire. The unit returned fire and was supported by artillery, helicopter gunships, airstrikes and a C-119 fire. The enemy withdrew after 10 minutes, leaving 3 dead and 2 AKs. US losses were 7 killed. At 9:55 a unit of the 199th LIB was attacked north-northeast of Phuc Bon and returned fire and directed airstrikes onto the location, and the bodies of 5 PAVN were seen in the strike area. At 5:20, 600 m to the northeast, another helicopter received fire and engaged the firing position and directed artillery and airstrikes onto the location. Following this, 41 PAVN dead were seen in the strike area. Southwest of Enlik, killing all 12 and capturing 4 individual weapons. At 3:30, an aerial observer from the 1st Cavalry Division directed artillery fire onto an enemy force south of Binh, attacked a PAVN force crossing the river supported by helicopter gunships, killing 27 PAVN and capturing 1. North-northwest of Chi Base Camp, killing 7. At 11:55, helicopter gunships from the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, received fire southwest of Trong Binh. The unit returned fire and the battle continued until the enemy withdrew at 5:40, leaving 22 dead and 1 AK-47 and 1 light machine gun. At 3:15 an OH-6 from the Earth Cavalry received fire southeast of Ta Nan, killing 7. At 6:30 another unit of the brigade engaged 5 PAVN 5 miles northeast of Ta Nan, killing all 5. At 9:35 helicopter gunships from the 12th Combat Aviation Group engaged an enemy force east of Du Ting, killing 7 and capturing 1 and 4 AKs and 2 Type 54 pistol. Northeast of Go Do Ho killed 6 PAVN and captured 4 AKs and 2 RPG-2 launchers. At 5:35 helicopter gunships from the 1st Cavalry Division attacked 20 PAVN 24 mi north of Tin Ninh, killing 12. Southeast of Ta Nan, killing 1. At 10:35 a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, engaged an enemy force near their night defensive position convert northeast of Trong Binh. The enemy withdrew after 10 minutes, leaving 4 dead and 2 individual weapons. Cumulative operational results to the end of December were 5,493 PAVN killed, 822 suspects detained and 1,839 individual and 246 crew-served weapons captured. US losses were 206 killed. Get ready for an exciting exploration as we unravel the mysteries of January. On 1 January at 1, a helicopter received fire 8 mi southwest of Binh and returned fire, killing 1 PAVN. At 2:45 a US Navy PBR patrolling southwest of Kattam, an AH-1 attacked the firing position and 1 dead PAVN was seen in the strike area. At 8:45 a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Infantry Division, in a night defensive position southwest of engaged a PAVN force approaching their position, killing 3 and capturing 3 weapons. At 12:35 a PAVN soldier triggered a mine around the night defensive position of a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Infantry Division, north-northwest of Unlik received fire. The unit returned fire and the enemy withdrew, leaving 2 dead and 2 individual weapons. At 4:45 a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged 3 PAVN approaching their position 6 miles southeast of Lic Ninh, killing 2 and capturing 2 individual weapons. At 5:30 a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, was attacked with grenades 3 miles east of Trong Binh. The unit returned fire and captured 1 PAVN and 1 individual weapon. Also at 5:30 a mechanized infantry unit of the 1st Infantry Division in a position east-northeast of Tin Ninh, killing all 5. Northeast of Go Do Ho killed 5 PAVN and captured 1 individual weapon and 67 mortar rounds. On 3 January at 3, Helicopters from the Earth Cavalry attacked 6 PAVN southwest of Go-Doha supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew at 12:10 on 4 January, leaving 5 dead and 4 individual weapons. Northwest of Dongbo, killing all 6 and capturing 3 individual weapons. At 2:10 a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, supported by artillery and helicopter gunships engaged an enemy force southeast of Unlik. The enemy withdrew after 20 minutes, leaving 4 dead, 4 individual weapons and a radio. At 8 a Ranger unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, supported by artillery and helicopter gunships engaged 10 PAVN 6 miles south of Bunlik, killing 9. A UH-1 was shot down 7 miles south-southeast of Kattam, north-northeast of Tinin. Contact was lost at 10:30, but air cavalry forces pursued and re-established contact, which continued until the enemy withdrew at 4:15, leaving 87 dead and 29 individual and 7 crew-served weapons. U.S. losses were 1 killed. At 4 a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, engaged an enemy force west of King Bon Dung on 8 January at 7:50. Infantry from the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, supported by armor, artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes engaged an enemy force 7 mi northeast of Tinin. The enemy withdrew at 6:30, leaving 62 dead and 2 individual weapons. U.S. losses were 2 killed, including specialist rank south-southeast of Tinin. All had been killed by artillery fire 12 hours earlier. At 11:20 a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, found 13 PAVN dead and 9 individual weapons 20 mi north-northeast of Tinin. All had been killed by airstrikes. At 5:35 a unit of the 1st Cavalry Division engaged 10 PAVN convert south of Vietcong. The enemy withdrew after several minutes. U.S. losses were 1 killed. A UH-1 was shot down in Tinin. On 9 January at 10, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, was attacked 7 miles north-northeast of Tinin. The unit returned fire supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew at 6, leaving 47 dead. At 12:45 a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, was attacked with grenades 11 mi northwest of Bunt. The unit returned fire, killing 1 PAVN and capturing 2 individual weapons. At 3:35 helicopter gunships of the 1st Cavalry Division attacked a bunker complex combat northeast of Kfong, killing 7 PAVN. At 4:25 a helicopter from the 1st Aviation Brigade received fire 1 mile northeast of Trumbing and returned fire, killing 5 PAVN. On 10 January at 8, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, was attacked 7 mi northeast of Tinin. The unit returned fire and was supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes in a battle that continued all day until the enemy withdrew at 5:50, leaving 13 dead. At 10:30 a mechanized infantry unit of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, found 56 PAVN dead and 3 individual and 2 crew-served weapons southeast of Kattam. The unit returned fire and was supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes, which forced the enemy to withdraw after 15 minutes, leaving 41 dead and 1 individual and 1 crew-served weapon. At 5:48 m to the south the same units were attacked by the enemy. The unit returned fire and the enemy withdrew after 35 minutes, leaving 21 dead and 1 crew-served weapon. At 12:25 a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy force south of Tinin. The enemy withdrew after 20 minutes, leaving 7 dead and 3 individual weapons. A UH-1 was shot down southeast of Kattam. The unit returned fire and the enemy withdrew after 10 minutes, leaving 15 dead and 2 machine guns. On 12 January at 8:30, helicopters from the 12th Combat Aviation Group engaged an enemy force west-southwest of Kchi containing 84 RPG-2 grenades and 75 Bangalore torpedoes. At 8:15, troops from the Earth Cavalry engaged PAVN north of Unlik, killing 6 and capturing 4 individual weapons. At 6, a Ranger unit from the 25th Infantry Division engaged 6 PAVN northeast of Du Ting, killing 6 and capturing 3 individual weapons. At 9:35, a unit of the 199th LIB was ambushed west-southwest of Kattam. North of Tinin was hit by 100 mortar rounds followed by a ground attack. The units returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships. The enemy withdrew at 3, leaving 19 dead and 6 AKs, 3 RPG-2 launchers and 1 RPG-7 launcher. US losses were 1 killed. At 6:10, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry attacked 1520 PAVN east-northeast of Singh was attacked by an enemy force. The unit returned fire and the enemy withdrew after 10 minutes, leaving 2 dead. North of Phuc Bon, killing 7. At 4:25, helicopter gunships of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, killed 7 PAVN east-northeast of Singh, all killed in 2 overnight ambushes. At 2:25, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry attacked an enemy force south-southwest of Unlik, northeast of Ban Tray, killing 8 PAVN and capturing a light machine gun and an 82 mortar site. At 8, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, engaged 10 PAVN 4 miles north of Chi, killing 6 and capturing 1 individual and 1 crew-served weapons. On 19 January at 11:20, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, found a munitions cache northeast of Tinin. The unit returned fire and the enemy withdrew. Also at 2:15, mechanized infantry from the 1st Brigade, 1st Infantry Division, found a munitions cache southeast of Kfong. At 5:10, the air rifle platoon was landed in the area and they found 12 dead. An AH-1 was shot down 6 miles southeast of Phuc Bon. North of Tinin, all had been killed the previous day. At 12:30, an OH-6 was shot down south-southwest of Unlik was attacked by fire. The unit returned fire supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and an AC-119. The enemy withdrew after 20 minutes. US losses were 1 killed. At 11:50, helicopter gunships from the 1st Cavalry Division received fire north-northeast of Liknin. The unit was reinforced by other regiment units and a unit from the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division. The enemy withdrew at 4, leaving 35 dead and 7 AKs, 1 machine gun, 4 RPG launchers, a 57 recoilless rifle and a 60 mortar. At 8:50, a box of mortar north-northeast of Unlik. At 10:30, helicopters from the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy force 20 mi northeast of Tinin and directed airstrikes on the position. The enemy withdrew, leaving 8 dead and 3 machine guns among 5 destroyed bunkers. At 5:25, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry engaged an enemy force northeast of Tinin supported by helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew at 5:30, leaving 8 dead and 1 AK-47. US losses were 1 killed. At 12:15, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Infantry Division, received fire northwest of Chi. The enemy withdrew after 50 minutes, leaving 7 dead and 2 AKs. At 12:20, another element of the unit engaged 6 PAVN southeast of Kattam. On 23 January at 3:45, a unit of the 11th ACR received fire northeast of Tinin. It returned fire and directed artillery and airstrikes onto the area and 12 PAVN dead were seen in the strike area. West of Tinin, the enemy withdrew after an hour, leaving 22 dead. Southeast of Kattam and returned fire, killing 9. At 12:30, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy platoon 9 miles east of Phuc Bon. The enemy withdrew after 45 minutes, leaving 10 dead. US losses were 2 killed. At 11:30, a Ranger unit of the 1st Infantry Division engaged an enemy unit east-northeast of Unlik. The unit returned fire supported by helicopter gunships and the enemy withdrew. US losses were 3 killed. At 10:45, 20 rockets hit Tinin combat base, killing 1 Vietnamese civilian. At 11:50, a unit of the Armored Cavalry Squadron of the 25th Infantry Division found a weapons cache south of east of Toan. All had been killed within the previous 24 hours. On 28 January at 1:25, a unit of the 199th LIB and RF forces engaged an enemy squad 7 mi southeast of Unlik. The enemy withdrew after an hour, leaving 7 dead and 1 AK-47. An AH-1 was shot down north-northwest of Tinin. Sporadic contact continued until 5:20 when the enemy withdrew. US losses were 1 killed. At 4:20, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, received fire northeast of Unlik, received mortar fire followed by a ground attack. The unit returned fire supported by helicopter gunships and an SC-119. The enemy withdrew after 45 minutes, leaving 5 dead. US losses were 2 killed. At 7:25, a unit of the 199th LIB engaged 6 Pavnov combat east-northeast of Binha. The enemy withdrew after 20 minutes, leaving 2 dead. Cumulative operational results to the end of January were 6,734 Pavnov killed and 2,145 individual and 277 crew-served weapons captured. US losses were 261 killed. Get ready for an exciting part as we dive into February. On 1 February at 10:25, a helicopter from the Earth Cavalry received fire 4 mi southwest of and returned fire and directed artillery and airstrikes onto the firing location. 8 Pavnov dead were seen in the strike area. At 10:50, a light observation helicopter from the Earth Cavalry received fire northeast of Liknin. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships, and the enemy withdrew after 10 minutes. US losses were 1 killed. At 1:35, a helicopter from the Earth Cavalry received fire east-southeast of Tinin was attacked by fire. The unit returned fire supported by artillery, helicopter gunships, and an AC-119. The enemy withdrew at 9:30, leaving 3 dead. US losses were 2 killed, including First Lieutenant Russell A. Steindam, who would be posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for smothering a hand grenade with his body. A UH-1 was shot down 6 miles southwest of Like, killing 1 US and 6 ARVN. East of Tinin engaged an enemy unit, killing 6 and capturing 1 individual weapon. At 8:30, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Infantry Division, engaged 5 Pavnov south of Binha. The convoy security unit engaged the attackers, and the next morning a search of the ambush site found 2 dead VC and 1 individual weapon. On 3 February at 1:20, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, received fire southeast of Katam, engaged an enemy unit. The battle continued until 5 when the enemy withdrew, leaving 19 dead and 11 individual weapons. At 1:05, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry engaged an enemy force north of Binha. Cavalry troops were landed in the area and the enemy withdrew at 8:15, leaving 23 dead. On 4 February at 4:25, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, at a firebase northwest of Katam and returned fire, killing 3 Pavnov. At 6:45, another light observation helicopter from the Earth Cavalry received fire 11 miles northwest of Katam and returned fire, killing 3 Pavnov. At 6:55, another light observation helicopter from the Earth Cavalry received fire west-northwest of Unlik, received fire and returned fire, forcing the enemy to withdraw after 10 minutes. At 7:35, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, engaged 3 Pavnov northeast of Trungbing. At 7:50, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, in a night defensive position east of Toan and received fire and engaged an enemy force, killing 1. At 9:40, a unit from the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, received fire 6 miles northeast of Toan. The unit returned fire and the enemy withdrew, leaving 4 Pavnov dead and 3 individual weapons. At 9:50, a unit from the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, received fire 7 miles north-northeast of Toan and returned fire, killing 1 Pavnov. Northeast of Trungbing, The unit was supported by helicopter gunships and an AC-119. The enemy withdrew leaving 8 dead and 2 individual weapons. U.S. losses were 2 killed. At 1:30, a unit of the 1st Cavalry Division in a night defensive position north of Kunli. The unit returned fire supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes, and the enemy withdrew after 20 minutes. At midday, a unit from the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, received fire southeast of Like and returned fire. Cavalry troops were landed at the firing position and found 4 PAVN dead and 2 individual weapons. Northwest of Liknin and returned fire and directed artillery and airstrikes onto the firing location. 5 PAVN dead were seen in the strike area. At 4:50, a unit of the 11th ACR and a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, received fire from an entrenched enemy force north of Tinin supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew at 4:20, leaving 14 dead and 2 captured and 6 individual and 1 crew-served weapons. At 6:15, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, received fire southeast of Tinin. The enemy withdrew after 45 minutes, leaving 5 dead. A USAF North American Rockwell OV-10 Bronco southeast of Chatham. On 10 February at 6:30, a unit of the Armored Cavalry Squadron of the 1st Infantry Division engaged an enemy force 5 mi southeast of Bint. The enemy withdrew after 15 minutes, leaving 8 dead. At 6:45, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy unit east-southeast of Chatham. Specialist for John Backer would be awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions in smothering an enemy hand grenade with his body. On 11 February at 2:40, helicopter gunships from Earth Cavalry attacked 20 PAVN 9 miles west of Liknin, killing 9. On 12 February at 9:50, a unit of the 199th LIB received fire southwest of Trongbing containing 59 RPG-2 grenades and 25 RPG-7 grenades. At 1:55, a unit of the 199th LIB engaged 7 PAVN north of Tinin received fire. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships. The contact was lost at 3:15 but re-established at 4:15, and the battle continued until 6:40 when the enemy withdrew, leaving 44 dead. U.S. losses were 10 killed and 1 tank and 1 armored reconnaissance vehicle destroyed. At 7:10, helicopter gunships of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged 10 PAVN south of Birkit Base. On 15 February at 11:45, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, found a 10-ton rice cache north of Tinin. The enemy withdrew after 5 minutes, leaving 3 dead. U.S. losses were 2 killed. At 8:25, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, operating southwest of and returned fire, killing 6 PAVN. At 1:40, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, found 11 PAVN dead northwest of Birkit. On 17 February at 11:35, helicopters from the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, received fire northeast of Liknin. The enemy withdrew, leaving 1 dead and 1 individual weapon. On 18 February at 2:25, a UH-1 was shot down south of Like. The enemy withdrew after 2 hours, leaving 4 dead and 1 captured and 5 individual weapons. U.S. losses were 1 killed. An OH-6 was shot down 9 miles south-southwest of Like, northwest of Unlik, containing 52 rifles, 7 light machine guns and 10,000 rounds of small arms ammunition. At 12:40, helicopter gunships from the 11th ACR supported by artillery attacked an enemy force northwest of Tinin supported by helicopter gunships and an AC-119. The enemy withdrew at 8:50. U.S. losses were 2 killed. At 9:15, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, and U.S. Navy was attacked a sampan carrying 7 PAVN northeast of Tinin. The enemy withdrew after 45 minutes, leaving 11 dead. South-southwest of Like, air cavalry troops were landed in the area and found 10 PAVN dead. At 10:40, an armored unit of the 25th Infantry Division received fire north-northwest of Like. The unit returned fire and the enemy withdrew. US losses were 1 killed. On 22 February at 3:05, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, engaged an enemy force 7 miles north-northeast of Toan, killing 5 PAVN. At 5:30, a unit of the 1st Cavalry Division found a weapons cache west-southwest of Kattam, killing 6 PAVN. North-northeast of Liknin was attacked by fire. The unit was supported by artillery and helicopter gunships and the enemy withdrew at 4:30, leaving 2 dead and 1 RPG launcher and various munitions. At 7, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, searching the scene of a mechanical ambush southeast of Kattam. The enemy withdrew after 25 minutes. US losses were 1 killed. North of Hampton District, the unit returned fire supported by helicopter gunships and the enemy withdrew, leaving 7 dead and 2 individual weapons. At 10:15, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, engaged an enemy force east-northeast of Toan and supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew at 4:15, leaving 8 dead and 13 individual weapons and 1 light machine gun. US losses were 1 killed. At 3:20, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy unit northeast of Liknin. The enemy withdrew at 6:25, leaving 6 dead. At 7:20, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, engaged 15 PAVN combat north-northeast of Tinin. The enemy withdrew after 25 minutes, leaving 6 dead. Cumulative operational results to the end of February were 10,832 PAVN killed and 4,148 individual and 418 crew-served weapons captured. US losses were 458 killed. With our curiosity piqued, let's embark on a dedicated exploration of March and its fascinating intricacies. On 1 March at 9:50, a unit of the 199th LIB engaged an enemy unit 25 mi north-northwest of Hampton supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew at 2:05. US losses were 2 killed. At 10:35, a unit of the 1st Cavalry Division found a 60-ton rice cache south of the Cambodian border, north-northeast of Tinin. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships and the enemy withdrew at 4:25. US losses were 1 killed. At 4:45, helicopter gunships from the 11th Aviation Group engaged an enemy force east of Toan and found 11 PAVN dead. All had been killed in the previous 24 hours. Also at 9, a unit of the 11th ACR operating west of Liknin. The enemy withdrew after 45 minutes, leaving 27 dead and 13 individual weapons. A UH-1 was shot down northeast of Tinin. The enemy withdrew, leaving 10 dead and 10 individual weapons. At 5, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy force north of Tinin, received mortar fire followed by a ground probe. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships and the enemy withdrew after 5 minutes, leaving 37 dead and 12 individual weapons. US losses were 1 killed. An OH-6 was shot down east-southeast of Kattam. The unit was supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes and the enemy withdrew at 5, leaving 17 dead. At 4:15, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged for PAVN north-northeast of Phuc Bon and 1 mile from the Cambodian border, killing 4 on board. Southeast of Kattam, the enemy withdrew after 30 minutes, leaving 31 dead. At 9:55, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy company from the Cambodian border, killing 6. At 5:35, the Earth Cavalry engaged an enemy force 9 miles northeast of Liknin. The enemy withdrew after 40 minutes, leaving 8 dead. US losses were 1 killed. A UH-1 was shot down 9 miles southeast of Bantray. On 7 March at 6:30, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division in a night defensive position north of Hampton found an enemy cache defended by a platoon who engaged the unit but withdrew after 40 minutes, leaving 4 dead and 2 individual weapons. The cache totaled 7.5 tons of flour. Northeast of Vietcong. Contact was lost at 2:45, then re-established and then lost at 7. 4 PAVN were killed and 3 US killed. At 4:25, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy unit southeast of Liknin. The units returned fire supported by artillery and the enemy withdrew after 10 minutes. A UH-1 was shot down northwest of Vietcong. On 9 March at 4:05, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, at a firebase northeast of Tinin. The unit was supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes, and the PAVN withdrew at 1:15, leaving 32 dead, 2 individual weapons, a 57 recoilless rifle and a field telephone. US losses were 4 killed. At 10:30, a unit of the 11th ACR engaged a battalion from the PAVN 7th Division northwest of Unilik, killing 5 and capturing 1 and 3 individual weapons. At 1:15, a mechanized infantry unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, engaged an enemy unit north of Tinin containing 23 tons of rice. 4 PAVN dead and 2 individual weapons were found nearby who had been killed by airstrikes. At 6:25, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry received fire northwest of Katam engaged an enemy force, killing 6 in a 4-hour battle. At 1:45, a unit of the 199th LIB found a food cache southeast of Binha. An OH-6 was shot down northwest of Katam, was attacked by fire, and the unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships. The enemy withdrew after 35 minutes, leaving 8 dead and 1 individual weapon. At 6:30, a unit of the 11th ACR and troops from the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, in a night defensive position southeast of Tinin. The enemy withdrew at 5:15, leaving 11 dead and 260 mortars. At 5:10, a US Navy PBR received RPG fire from BRA, killing all 10 on board. An OH-6 was shot down northeast of Vietcong supported by artillery. 8 bodies were seen in the strike area. At 3:15, a unit of the Earth Cavalry operating north of Tinin was attacked by fire. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships. The enemy withdrew, leaving 12 dead. US losses were 1 killed. As the unit was searching the battle area, an AH-1 experienced a weapons system malfunction and fired several folding fin aerial rocket northwest of Hampton. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships. US losses were 2 killed. At 4:10, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy force 28 mi north of Tinin. The enemy withdrew after 5 minutes, leaving 10 dead. At 7:20, helicopters from the Earth Cavalry attacked an enemy force northeast of Tinin. The unit returned fire supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew at 7. US losses were 1 killed. At 3, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry received fire northeast of Vietcong. The enemy withdrew after an hour, leaving 5 dead. US losses were 2 killed. A UH-1 was shot down north of Tinin and directed artillery fire onto the position, killing all 6. At 3:30, a mechanized infantry unit of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, received fire to the southeast. An infantry unit from the 1st Brigade received fire and returned fire supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes which forced the enemy to withdraw at 6. Northeast of Tinin and engaged 2 PAVN, killing both of them. At 11:50, a helicopter gunship from the Earth Cavalry received fire northwest of Tinin. The enemy withdrew after 30 minutes, leaving 10 dead. US losses were 1 killed. At 8:25, a unit from the 3rd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, received fire northwest of Tinin. The unit was supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes, and the enemy withdrew after 15 minutes. At 2:30, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, received fire north-northwest of Singb. Northwest of Tinin, a unit of the 1st Brigade reinforced the contact, and artillery and helicopter gunships provided support. The enemy withdrew at 1:30, leaving 39 dead and 13 AKs and 1 RPG-2 launcher. At 2:15, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, found 39 PAVN dead in mass graves south of Godohal. The enemy withdrew immediately, leaving 5 dead. On 20 March at 2:45, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, engaged an enemy force west-northwest of Vietcong. At 6:15, a helicopter gunship from the Earth Cavalry received fire 7 miles northeast of Vietcong and returned fire, killing 6 PAVN. On 21 March at 11:40, helicopters from the Earth Cavalry found a rice cache west-northwest of Vietcong. At 12:05, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy force northwest of Kchi supported by artillery and helicopter gunships. The enemy withdrew after 50 minutes, leaving 9 dead and 2 individual weapons. At 11:45, a helicopter from the 11th Aviation Group engaged PAVN southeast of Binha. An OH-6 was shot down northwest of Vietcong, found 2 rice caches totaling 16 tons. At 10:20, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, engaged an enemy force northwest of Tinin. The enemy withdrew immediately, leaving 5 dead and 3 individual weapons. At 11, the same unit engaged another enemy force northwest of Vietcong containing 11,300 rounds of small arms ammunition, 54-60 mortar rounds, 49-75 recoilless rifle rounds, and 6 RPG-2 grenades. At 3, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy force southwest of Singb. North of Tinin, killing 5 and capturing 1. North-northwest of Tinin, supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. Another brigade unit and a unit from the 11th ACR reinforced, and the enemy withdrew at 7:10, leaving 88 dead. US losses were 2 killed. At 1:40, helicopters from the 11th ACR attacked 1520 PAVN northeast of Tinin. On 27 March at 1:25, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division, engaged an enemy force northeast of Tinin. The enemy withdrew immediately, leaving 5 dead and 4 individual weapons. At 1, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy force north of Du Ting. The troops returned fire and mechanized infantry from the brigade moved to join the battle. The enemy withdrew at 5:30, leaving 3 dead. US losses were 1 killed. At 7:30, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, in a night defensive position north-northwest of Tinin, received mortar and rocket fire followed by a ground assault by a PAVN battalion from the 9th Division. The units returned fire supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and an AC-119. The enemy withdrew at 6, leaving 74 dead and 3 captured and 12 AKs. US losses were 13 killed. On 30 March at 2:45, a Ranger unit from the 1st Cavalry Division engaged an enemy unit north-northeast of Vietcong. All had been killed in the previous 2 days. At 6, a helicopter from the Earth Cavalry received fire north of Vietcong. North-northwest of Hampton, the unit returned fire supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew after 35 minutes, leaving 2 dead. US losses were 2 killed. At 11:15, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, received fire north-northwest of Tinin supported by artillery and helicopter gunships. The enemy withdrew at 3:30, leaving 30 dead and 16 captured and 5 individual and 2 crew-served weapons. At 7:25, a helicopter from the Earth Cavalry attacked 8 PAVN in bunkers west-southwest of Trumbing, engaged an enemy force, killing 6 and capturing 3 individual weapons. A UH-1 was shot down combat south of Bantray, killing 1 US and 3 ARVN soldiers. Cumulative operational results to the end of March were 13,614 PAVN killed and 5,298 individual and 529 crew-served weapons captured. US losses were 628 killed. Let's now enter the realm of April and discover the fascinating stories it has to tell. On 1 April during the early morning, most Allied bases in the operational area received attacks by fire causing minimal damage. At 120 Firebase Illingworth 22 mi northwest of Tinin, occupied by Companies Celsius and E, 2nd Battalion, 8th Cavalry Regiment, Brigadier General William R. Bond. At 1 helicopters from the Earth Cavalry attacked 9 PAVN 32 mi north of Tinin, killing all 9. An OH-6 was shot down southeast of Tinin. The unit returned fire supported by helicopter gunships and the enemy withdrew after 15 minutes, leaving 12 dead. US losses were 2 killed. 30 minutes later, a unit of the 3rd Brigade moved into the area and engaged an enemy force supported by helicopter gunships and airstrikes. Fighting continued until the enemy withdrew at 6:40, leaving 20 dead. US losses were 8 killed. On 3 April at 7:45, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, engaged 9 PAVN northwest of Godoha, killing 6. On 4 April at 2, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, found a munitions cache northeast of Phuc Bon containing 134,000 rounds of small arms ammunition and 4682 mortar rounds. At 10:35, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, was ambushed by an enemy unit northeast of Phuc Bon containing 265,000 rounds of small arms ammunition. On 7 April at 7:40, a unit of the 199th LIB received fire southwest of Tinin. The action continued until the enemy withdrew at 6:45. US losses were 5 killed. At 5:45, a unit of the 199th LIB received fire south of Tinin, killing 1 crewman. On 9 April at 1:10, a unit of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, received fire northwest of Tinin, was attacked by fire. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and the enemy withdrew after an hour, leaving 12 dead and 1 RPG launcher. US losses were 2 killed. At 5:25, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry attacked 7 PAVN northwest of Tinin, engaged an enemy unit supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes. The enemy withdrew at 1:20, but contact was re-established at 4:10 and the enemy finally withdrew at 4:40, leaving 26 dead and 7 individual and 4 crew-served weapons. US losses were 2 killed. At 4, a unit of the 199th LIB engaged 10 PAVN northeast of Tinin. The gunships returned fire and also called in artillery and airstrikes, and 12 PAVN dead were seen in the strike area. A UH-1 was shot down north of Bonson. On 13 April at 12:15, a unit of the 11th ACR engaged an enemy force northeast of Tinin and attacked the firing position, causing 3 secondary explosions. The bodies of 28 PAVN dead were seen in the strike area. At 5, a unit of the 11th ACR engaged 8 PAVN northeast of Tinin, killing 1. At 4:40, a unit of the 11th ACR found 17 PAVN dead northwest of Tinin and half a mile from the Cambodian border, killing 12. At 9:45, a unit of the 11th ACR at a firebase northwest of Tinin, killing 7 and capturing 1 AK-47. On 17 April at 8, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, found 8 PAVN dead and 5 individual weapons southwest of Du Ting. The enemy withdrew at 7, leaving 9 dead and 6 individual and 1 crew-served weapons. US losses were 1 killed. A UH-1 hit power lines and crashed into the Ingne River northwest of Hampton, was attacked by fire. The unit returned fire supported by artillery and helicopter gunships, and the enemy withdrew at 4:35, leaving 23 PAVN dead and 2 captured and 4 individual and 4 crew-served weapons. US losses were 1 killed. At 12:50, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy force east-southeast of Binh Ha. The unit returned fire and was supported by artillery, helicopter gunships and airstrikes, and the enemy withdrew at 5:45. U.S. losses were 2 killed. At 5, a helicopter from the Earth Cavalry received fire north-northeast of Toan, killing 7. A UH-1 was shot down northeast of Thi Ninh, killing 10. An OH-6 was shot down 6 miles south of Binh Ha. On 21 April, an OH-6 was shot down southeast of Phuc Bon, killing 12 PAVN. An OH-6 was shot down east-northeast of Phuc Bon. At 4:15, a helicopter gunship from the Earth Cavalry received fire north of Toan and engaged PAVN. The enemy withdrew after 30 minutes, leaving 5 dead. On 25 April at 3, helicopters from the 11th Aviation Group engaged an enemy force south of Phuc Bon supported by artillery and airstrikes. The bodies of 7 PAVN were seen in the strike area. On 26 April at 9:45, a unit of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, operating engaged an entrenched enemy force northeast of Phuc Bon engaged an enemy unit, killing 21 and capturing 4 individual weapons. U.S. losses were 3 killed. At 12:40, a helicopter gunship from the Earth Cavalry received fire north-northwest of Thi Ninh and returned fire, killing 7 PAVN. At 6:10, helicopter gunships from the Earth Cavalry attacked 18 PAVN 30 miles north-northwest of Thi Ninh and called in airstrikes on the area. 16 PAVN and 7 destroyed bunkers were seen in the strike area. A UH-1 was shot down northeast of Phuc Bon. The enemy withdrew after 50 minutes, leaving 24 dead and 3 individual weapons. Northeast of Phuc Bon and returned fire, killing 7 PAVN. At 6:10, a unit of the Earth Cavalry engaged an enemy force southeast of Binh Ha. The enemy withdrew at 12:15, leaving 9 dead. At 8:20, a unit of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, engaged an enemy platoon northeast of Thi Ninh containing 1,275 howitzer rounds, 10 RPG-2 grenades and 1 individual weapon. At 5:20, a unit of the 199th LIB engaged an enemy force 19 miles southeast of Binh Ha. The enemy withdrew after 10 minutes, leaving 7 dead and 1 individual weapon. A UH-1 Medivac was shot down northwest of Thi Ninh Haup. In the upcoming section, we'll be dissecting aftermath and exploring its intricate connections to our topic. The operation concluded on 1 May 1970. 14,479 PAVN were killed and 5,406 individual and 586 crew-served weapons captured. U.S. losses were 685 killed. With the start of the Cambodian campaign on 29 April, all units involved in the operation moved their focus to the PAVN base areas along the Cambodian-South Vietnamese border. I appreciate your time and I'm grateful for every like, comment, and share.